In 2017, a cyber attack targeting a chemical facility was designed to undermine safety systems controlling critical process in this facility. So researchers found that under the right circumstances, this could have created massive physical destruction across the whole facility. Short later, also a study found that an attack that was designated to tamper with data for pressure vessels in a chemical factory could have resulted not just in physical destruction of assets, but actual injury and potentially death of the employees. These are just two examples of the massive global industrial challenge that we have in front of us in terms of safety. You have seen these numbers already. The International Labour Organization estimates that around 3 million people die every year from unsafe working conditions. So to give you a sense of the scale, this is more than the deaths that were reported at the height of the pandemic. Work-related safety incidents result in the loss of approximately 4% of global GDP. And all of this affects developing countries disproportionately, where only 10% of people are protected by safety regulations. So we're talking here that we have a moral, but also an economic imperative to tackle the global safety challenge head-on in a global scale. Now, the challenge of industrial safety has always been as long as people have been going to workplaces. But today, something is different, and that is technology. So over the last few years, we have technologies like Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, smart robotics, that are becoming cheaper, easier to use, more widely accessible to companies all around the world. So as companies adopt these technologies, the safety challenges are also evolving. So for example, how do we make sure that automated guided vehicles that go across our factories make sure that they don't collapse and they don't collide with employees? How do we make sure that algorithms underpinned by artificial intelligence prioritize worker safety when they have to make some choices? And how do we make sure that the algorithms that we use to monitor machines take safety as its #1 priority? So with all these challenges in mind, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, the Lloyd's Register Foundation, and the Global Manufacturing and Industrialization Summit, supported by the University of Cambridge, came up with this idea of developing the Global Initiative for Industrial Safety, GIFIS. The initiative recognizes that technology brings new risks, which I've just mentioned, but it also acknowledges that technology has some solutions. We can use drones to conduct hazardous inspections in high altitude, so we don't have to expose a worker. We can use advanced sensors and analytics to help predict failures with some machines that are already vibrating. We know they're going to fail, and we make some actions to ensure that they're safe to operate. And also we can use things like virtual reality and head-mounted displays to give operators instructions when they need to know and follow very specific procedures when they're in dangerous areas. So the first output of the GIFIS initiative is the Manifesto for Global Industrial Safety, which I'm introducing to you today. Our teams have worked with experts from around the world, companies, regulators, and governments, to identify a set of industry principles for the safe implementation of emerging technologies in industry. So the manifesto's goals are as follows. #1, promote the safe adoption of technology in new industrial processes and the use of technology-enabled safety solutions. Anticipate emerging safety concerns, emerging safety risks, and disseminate real-life examples to tackle them. And highlight the need to support developing countries that disproportionately are affected by safety risks. Now, the manifesto has 5 leading principles, and in the next 5 minutes, I'll take you through them very quickly. The first principle is uphold the human right to safe working conditions. Now, in June 2022, the International Labour Conference added the principle of a safe and healthy working environment to its fundamental principles and rights at work. So until there, we only had 4 fundamental rights according to International Labour Organization. But this becomes occupational safety and health become the 5th category of these fundamental principles. So it is enshrined by a commitment shared by many countries around the world at an international platform. So the manifesto therefore sets this overarching expectation that the global industrial community should embrace a renewed commitment to deliver safe and healthy working environments as a fundamental human right, making emphasis on the role that technology can play in achieving this international agreement. That was principle number 1. Principle number 2 is ensuring that safety is central to technology decisions. So this principle encourages companies and stakeholders to take steps to identify and respond to emerging safety challenges as they come across, with novel applications of technologies. With particular attention, and this is quite important because we start thinking usually about the risks to our personal physical well-being, but this principle emphasizes the risk to psychosocial risks, so the mental well-being of employees. So it is imperative to identify new cyber and physical, but as well as psychosocial risks from new technologies and reflect them in company policies and procedures, job instruction sheets, and day-to-day operations. Now, principle number 3 is exploit new technology-enabled safety solutions. Now, this principle recognizes that while new technologies bring about these new potential risks, they also bring about new solutions. There are already some well-known solutions that I've just mentioned before, including drones, using AI, predictive maintenance, data analytics. But what we need to do is to increase the awareness of these technologies, make sure that people understand how they can be applied, make sure that people understand that it's not necessarily a very expensive process, but actually could be quite cheap to do, and deploy new skills in order to deploy them globally. Number 4 is share, monitor, and promote safety lessons. So many companies are hesitant to share data about safety, risk, or near misses, for example. But what we need to do is to develop a new monitoring and data sharing culture. This principle is about encouraging organizations to commit to building safety knowledge by sharing lessons learned and near misses, as well as best practice, data, and tools. Now, finally, the 5th principle is support safety improvements in developing countries. While safety is a fundamental right, as just mentioned, across the world, it is a universal fundamental human right. It affects disproportionately developing countries, which often lack some of the frameworks or some of the regulation of the implementation expertise. Just to give you data, Asia and the Pacific account for over 60% of global work-related mortality. So many countries still lack this legislation, and this principle calls for companies, governments, and civil society to join efforts to continuously and systematically support safety efforts in developing countries so no one is left behind. Now, finally, I would just like to invite you to support the manifesto, to contribute to its global impact, make sure that it's actually not just paper, but actually we implement it, to gain visibility and recognition of your organization. So we have a platform, and those signatories of the manifesto have the opportunity to showcase their experience and their improvements, and they could be on this global platform as a collateral to your dissemination activities. And finally, we're going to create, and we are creating, a global community of practice where safety professionals, regulators, and governments can come together to experience and to share these experiences around safety. Please download the manifesto using this QR code that you have in your screen, and well, we look forward to working with all of you. Thank you so much. And now to go into details about the manifesto. I've talked a little bit about the principles, but what we like to do is to invite our esteemed panelists to the stage, please, to discuss a little bit about the principles in more detail. Please, if the panelists could come. So it's my pleasure to introduce you today to our esteemed panelists. And I will start with Farouk Alimjanov, who is Industrial Development Officer for the Division of Digital Transformation and Artificial Intelligence at UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Farouk has been a champion of this initiative from the very beginning. It's actually one of his initiatives close to his heart, and he will tell us more about why and where this idea came from. We have Zoe Ropakia, who is Policy and Artificial Intelligence Research Lead and Manifesto co-author at the Institute for Manufacturing at the University of Cambridge. And we have Douglas Ramsey, Managing Partner at Axia Global Advisors, who has also been a supporter of the initiative from the very beginning. So I would like to start with perhaps Farouk, with you, if I may, just to ask you, from the principles of the manifesto, which one do you think is more important? Which one is close to your heart or related to the operations that you work at UNIDO? And you could tell us a little bit more about that, please.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Indeed, I mean, those old principles are very close to my heart, very close to the mandate of UNIDO, because we are there to support industrial development, which must be inclusive and sustainable. In this inclusivity, we involve the topics of basically bringing industrial development to all countries, to make women, youth, all the layers of population to benefit from that, but also thinking about sustainability. We're talking about sustainability in the, let's say, traditional meaning of environmental sustainability, but more and more, especially after the COVID crisis, we are trying to speak about business resilience, economic sustainability, business sustainability, and in all that we basically put also the safety, the human safety factors, the occupational safety and security factors. So for us, it is development, human-centered development. We'll talk about digitalization more and more. For us, it's digitalization human-centered. For us, it's very important that with that change, we'll also bring the quality of life, improving the quality of life by making sure that being more competitive, trying to generate more socioeconomic values for their respective countries. SMEs are also taking care of their employees, so they're trying to make sure that there is occupational safety, etc., etc. So for us, I mean, industrial safety is not a new topic, but we were happy, as my dear colleague, Ms. Luo Mei was mentioning earlier at the very beginning of this session. For us, we were very happy to reinitiate the discussion about industrial safety. Industrial safety topic basically exists since 17th century. I think Lloyd Register Foundation, one of our partners, was one of the first to raise the topic of industrial safety. So we were happy to revive those discussions, especially now at the digital era. And as my colleague mentioned, so we started with the International Conference on Industrial Safety and linking it to the digital era. It coincided with the lockdown, the second year of this initiative. We faced the lockdown, and basically we woke up in a completely different world. It became more digital. So applying digital tools were for us very, very important, including into topics of industrial safety. I mean, digital as such might scare someone, that might bring some questions to the safety of using those, but we're trying to basically preach that with the right application of those tools, with the basic application of cybersecurity topic, those tools could be very healthy, very supportive to the industries, but also to benefit, to capitalize on those technologies, to bring a cost-efficient and safe digital tools to improve industrial safety. So just to reply maybe to your questions, all of them are basically favored by me, but I would like to maybe focus on the last three and maybe to bring them together, and that would also reflect the mandate of UNIDO. So supporting safety improvements in developing countries, that would be my a favored one, because we stand to bring these nose technologies to the developing countries, indeed not to leave anyone behind, but also doing it through basically driving, exploiting the new technologies, applying those in the real sector, but also sharing with simple, easily to do and easily to scale up examples around the world. So that would be my answer.
Thank you so much, Farooq. I think you make the point of safety has been always been there, but now we have this new technology paradigm, so I think that makes it not a boring topic, really. It's becoming really interesting even for young people. Zoe, you have been one of the co-authors of the report. You spent a lot of time looking at the case studies and really articulating the principles. What are your impressions?
For me, the most important principle is the first one: uphold the human right to safe working conditions, because even if we think that safety was always there, safety wasn't. The International Labour Organization 2 years ago recognized only 4 fundamental principles and rights at work: the elimination of child labor, forced labor, discrimination, unemployment, and the free association, and the right of collective bargaining. But safety wasn't there. So when we start, as you said, as a co-author, that speaks to me, and I found it very striking that when we started drafting the manifesto, safety wasn't a right. And while we developed, there was this landmark decision by the National Labour Organization to include safety as a 5th fundamental right, and that changed everything. It changed, now it's not, safety is not a technical concern, it's not an operational concern, it's actually we don't negotiate it, as we don't negotiate forced labor. And it's also very important because now all the 197 countries are forced to change and update their occupational safety and health programs. And it moves the discussion of safety from the factory floor to boardrooms. It transcends all the boundaries. Like it doesn't matter if you are in a wealthy country, in a super smart factory, or in a small workshop in a small developing country. You have the same right. And by embedded this principle in the manifesto, we actually reinforce this message that safety is not a luxury, is not a privilege, it's a human fundamental right.
That is brilliant, the universal nature of safety in the first principle. Thank you for that. So Douglas, you've been working around the world in different manufacturing conditions with different data-related initiatives as well. What is your impression? What would you highlight?
So if you're asking me to focus in on one of the 5 pillars, and force rank them, I'm going to go with the developing countries, right? I have a hard time sleeping at night sometimes because I worry about an emerging digital divide that's happening between the digital haves in the industrial market and the digital have-nots, right? And we're sending a message to industry right now that there's 2 big goals that are coming up that you've got to get ready for. One is net zero, okay? Net zero means you're going to be looking inside your company, you're going to be implementing systems, you're going to be recording how much energy goes into that operation. That's scope 1. Scope 2, you're going to be moving it around. Scope 3, I'm going to go the whole way down to my primary products, way down my supply chain, to try to gather that information to have accurate scope 3 reporting, the embedded carbon. So what we're saying to a lot of first world countries is that, well, this is a technology solution, right? This is automation, this is AI, this is new ways of sorting data, reporting data, structuring that data to be interoperable between different enterprises. Well, let's take that down the supply chain. Let's continue to take that down the supply chain. In the US, according to the last survey that we did through the National Smart Manufacturing Institute, 12% of our companies came back and said they were digital ready. 12. Okay? That's the small to mid-sized enterprises. Well, let's extend that out further, right? Now when you get into the BRICS, the developing world, and we're sending a message that they're going to be doing this reporting, for carbon. At the same time, we're sending a message that they're going to have to improve safety. And in fact, it's a human right. It's urgent, right? Yeah, I used to work at Alcoa, the aluminum company of America, worked in 40 different countries all over the world. It was rare that we had a death. It was really rare that we would have a death. We would have, if there was 1 or 2 a year, we would stop operations, right? Because we had the resources to really focus on safety. Now, when you push that down as a goal into these companies, you're pushing a lot of perceived cost of doing business. Unfortunately, right? Because a lot of these small companies, they are the growth engines of their communities. Whether they're in Southeast Asia, South Asia, they're in Sub-Saharan Africa, manufacturing creates growth, manufacturing creates jobs, right? So now we say net zero, zero for industrial, so how are we going to get there? And you said it really well, what's the cheap way? What's the plan? What's the solutions? If we want the zero on safety, we want the zero on sustainability, it has to be almost zero on cost. And it has to be a freemium. What are we doing to reach out with the digital tools that we have and reduce the cost and complexity for adopting some of those systems? That's the thing that keeps me up at night, because I see this, last thought, I see this coming out of Europe very aggressively with new regulations on the digital product passport, wants to have all the embedded manufacturing information put into it. Who picks up the cost for reporting that? No. And is there a trade-off with safety?
Yeah, brilliant.
So number 5 for me.
Great, and I think you make the point is, yeah, it's costly, but doesn't have to be that much, especially if we share the lessons learned already.
There's the challenge for us.
Yes, yeah. And I think, I mean, you guys already mentioned a little bit of specific technologies, but just to make sure that we are very clear about what we're talking about here, we're not talking about very futuristic or technologies that don't exist anymore. So I would like you to, perhaps Zoe, to ask you if you could share some concrete examples about how technologies are being used today, new technologies are being used today to tackle safety challenges, to make the workplace safer.
There are many different challenges as different companies starting adopting these technologies. One example comes from Ford company, that they have a pilot program 2 years ago to introduce collaborative cobots to help people that have some kind of mobility issues. And the robot works together with has sensors, so it activates when it's needed to be activated safely, and it helps people to the heavy lifting tasks. And they did that because they had an employee that was working 30 years in the company and developing mobility issues. And for me, it's very important because it highlights another message also, that when we talk about safe workplaces, we have to also to talk about inclusiveness in this safety. Also, we have like Shell drones, like Shell has drones for inspection of the high flare stack so that workers don't need to climb anymore. There is a mining company called Anglo-American that has developed an AI system for their remote operations in mining in Peru. And they have the ability to predict some kind of safety risks, and they claim that within a 6-year period managed to drop their, reduce the lost time in injuries. We have virtual training. Volkswagen also uses virtual training to train workers without putting them in the risky environments, for example, in the assembly lines. And the final example, I think it's from Hitachi construction company that uses this head-mounted displays that they give you commands, like direct you for the risk-prone tasks, but also monitors you. So there are different companies out there that have adopted these technologies, and it's quite interesting and quite important for them to share their lessons.
Thank you so much. Douglas, can you share a little bit more about similar examples?
So I want to get back to that really, really low cost example. And part of that is that we should be fishing in technology pools that are non-obvious. There's a little company in the US that does digitization in a box. It's a camera a $50 camera that you could buy at any given shop. You can mount it onto the ceiling. The company's called ThinkIQ. With that camera, suddenly they use a very low-cost open source AI protocol to be able to set up to monitor a workspace, right? And so now you begin collecting data off that workspace, and this could be an area that was never digitized, never monitored before. Trucking coming in and out of the site. When it goes to get weighed on the station, it gets filled up. There's somebody with a clipboard recording those numbers as the coal, the powders drop into the truck. It's a really dangerous job to be sitting there recording that thing. There's just a camera now, right? There's a camera, and that camera has a very simple AI job. It's to capture those numbers and be able to do an open language model to be able to capture the symbols, and boom, we have a real-time tracing. And we have the recording, so we're able to go back and record and now see best practices. It's very, very low cost. You don't need to be very technical to set it up. You attach it to the ceiling, you install the software, and it's up and ready to go. But the other place, and remember, I'm an old guy, okay? The kids that are coming into the workforce are digital natives, right? They simply don't think like us anymore. This was maybe 5 years ago at the mini plant outside of Munich. There was one young man, he's had a workstation, and he was on the riveting station as the cars came down, and he went to his boss and he said, hey, I think I could redesign this to be more efficient and safer. And he said, yeah, go ahead and give it a try. He was a gamer. So he went and he used the epic Unreal Engine. He blue light scanned his little workspace into this thing, came back to his boss, loaded it up onto Team Center with Siemens, and said, I think I can redesign this space. And he said, you're not allowed to do that. We're going to pay Siemens millions, or Rockwell, or Schneider Electric, to come and program these safety systems. He said, no, it's like, we're the workers. We're advocating, for what we know is going to be the best way and the cheapest way. So now if you're going to talk to the guys at Epic Games, they have a whole industrial practice in their gaming portfolio, right? We listen to the kids.
Yes,
the kids are going to take us interesting ways with new technologies.
Right, and I think that also talks to the integration of different industries, ICT industry with manufacturing industry. I think
they ended up doing the whole line on a game.
Yeah,
they did the whole line. Then they went and to put it into CAD/CAM.
So that, Farouk, just going to you, I think that talks a little bit. Douglas talking about costs, Zoe talking about some examples that we have now that we know that they work. What are your views on one of the specific solutions that we need to really democratize and make sure that everybody's using it in developing countries as well?
I think the question is really posed in the right way, and also just to second the previous speakers. Indeed, there are simple, low-hanging fruit solutions. They're not costing much. And democratization is a really good word. Maybe I will return back to that. But just to start with some examples, of course, you mentioned a few of them, based on IoTs, based on geographic information systems, on remote droning. We have digital twin solutions, 5G solutions, and AI, increasingly AI. So this relatively new topic, and a little bit the one which is scaring most of the industries of different generations in different countries, be it in developing countries, but also in OECD countries. They're not all ready to tap into that area. But just to give a few examples, topping up what colleague was saying, sometimes, for example, digital twinning is an excellent tool to try to predict, to decrease the risk of any injuries or any accidents at the very stage of designing the plant. So some simulations based on digital, replicas of the plans of the factories of the particular equipment, help to put in a right layout to avoid and to run some simulations to avoid any incidents on the ground, but also to design the production line to also run different scenarios and to ensure that nothing is happening. So that's one of the tools we haven't touched upon. AR, VR, and mixed reality, XR, they're also another very good tool to for example, train, make some awareness raising on how to deal with hazardous materials, with hazardous and risky equipment in hazardous environment, in mining, etc. So you don't need to really face the reality, the real risk. You might all simulate it sitting in front of the computer with special devices. Also, it's a very good, XR is a very good tool to predict, to ensure the early warnings, at the site. The IoTs of interlinked devices, especially in the larger space, in construction sites or in mining sites, where not only people are interconnected, but people are also connected with equipment, with different machines, so to ensure the fast injury management system or to avoid those injuries in general. And of course, IoTs, for basically putting sensors in the plant and to measure the health of the equipment and to also make build some patterns on the behavior of the equipment and to avoid any shutdowns of the equipment, which in turn can avoid any injuries on the ground. This could be supported as particular digital tool, but we're talking more and more about AI. Again, AI is a little bit maybe not so familiar animal, but we have to simplify. We have to simplify the things. I'm very happy that recently we launched a global alliance for artificial intelligence in industry and manufacturing. One of the objectives of which is to democratize those technologies. I'm very happy that those examples which I showed now, which I demonstrated, they're part of our cooperation with such partners as Huawei, as Siemens, as VRVs, as Fraunhofer. Today we had a good discussion with the local port administration. So there are also solutions applying 5G. For example, Huawei is leading a fully digitalized port management systems, which sometimes in ports, and especially exposed to the tropical conditions, sometimes they're exposed to the high temperatures. It could be really cold at the night. So some sensors of 5G low latency equipment might help remote control. So these guys are not losing the job, but they're going to the comfortable environment and they're controlling through remote sensing, OCR, very simple technology-based, let's say, the cargo management tools. This is also a very, very good example to show. So we're very happy to pool all these examples, and I hope that the same we can do within the manifesto exercise as well.
That's a real example. It seems like the factory is a video game, as you say, Douglas. And I would like to move just to the challenges to implementation. I think, Douglas, you mentioned two particularly that I've noted down. The first was around the digital divide. It's a challenge. And the second one was around monitoring of the workforce. You talk about using that camera example to monitor operations, but sometimes workers have this psychosocial stress from monitoring. So, what are the main challenges to the implementation of technologies for improving safety?
So I'm glad you got there. Because while I really like Pillar 5, there's one theme that cuts through the whole manifesto that I think is so important because we forget about it, and it is the psychosocial impacts of digitization. It's the holiday season now. All across the world, these fulfillment centers are now gearing up for this massive push of logistics and shipping of packages straight to your door. Most workers in those centers don't last more than 6 months until they're either hurt or they're mentally exhausted. So they become seasonal workers. They don't come back until November. They go off and they do a different job in between those seasons. The hurt is repetitive actions, so the cobots and other solutions like that, incredibly effective. But when you have an omnipresence system that's watching you and putting metrics on it, how many packages did you put in a bin every 3 minutes? That becomes incredibly onerous. And some of the systems that we're bringing from other industries, are following of unintended consequences. 30 years ago, I worked on flight simulators for military aircraft. We had one real big problem with all our flight simulators. They were great. bleeding edge. Had the whole heads-up display. Every pilot after 20 minutes, sick, really sick. That inner ear motion to eye connection, and then as you extend that AR/VR environment over 8 hours a day, 40 hours every week, you're in this environment where you have disconnects, neurological disconnects that are happening through your physical senses, whether that's seeing or hearing. There's long-term medical consequences for that. And I honestly don't think we've done quite enough on that. The little camera I was talking about, they block out all the people. The actual people that are shown there is just a little blue box or a red box, depending on the shift, or the role that they're doing. Because the other element of that is individual data privacy. You should have some rights to be safe, yes. You should also have some rights to be private. So all of those things are coming together, but the physical side and the physical impacts are easy to see. The mental impacts are hard to see and hard to measure.
Brilliant. That's a very important point. Zoe, do you have any other views on the challenges to implementation, perhaps from a technical perspective as well?
I want to comment on the digital divide first a bit, to give a bit of context that we also have a divide in monitoring. So we don't know exactly the extent of the problem in the developing countries. So according to the International Labour Organization, they have to report some incidents. Only 17 countries report. 60% of those countries are from high-income 6% are high-income countries, only 3% are from low-income countries. So we really don't know what's happening on the ground. There is an informal economy problem. We really don't know how many people work in the informal economy, and they are not covered from the national health and safety programs. Only 80% of the low-income countries have actually an updated occupational safety and health program. So there is this divide also in regulation. There is a divide in data that we have. And there is also the problem with, you mentioned briefly, like the AI safety regulation, that the big discussion nowadays, technology moves so fast, regulation doesn't keep the pace. And yes, there is a debate whether we should regulate and not regulate, pro-innovation or light, but the reality is that we should do something. So safety, and there are different initiatives like the EUA Act that is more pro-regulatory approach, but also we have the African Union Continental AI Strategy that comes from developing countries, that the unified approach, and they talk about putting safety when they are deploying this type of technologies within their own context. They take their own context into account. So back to the technical challenges, I think all of us, we mentioned so many different technologies. Imagine if you are a small enterprise. You can't choose. You have a limited budget. You have so many things, platforms, applications to choose from. You don't know what it works, and it costs. So if you choose to apply something, you need to be sure that it actually works. Otherwise, and that's why we see also with other projects that we did in digitalization, in digital manufacturing. And another problem, technical problem, on developing these technologies is the data sharing culture. So we talk about AI systems and AI safety and AI this and AI that. These are all very data savvy technologies. In order to build them, we need data. We need organizations to come together and share their data that sometimes are proprietary. I understand that. Sometimes they don't want to admit their failures. I understand that. But there are technologies that they can help us with that, like privacy-enhancing technologies, federated learning. You mentioned federated spaces earlier on. So, yes, I think we should develop better data sharing culture when it comes for objectives so important as it's the workplace safety.
Yeah, those are great points. I think the first one about the informal economy, I think, Farouk, if we see this in developing countries, is we don't know how many companies are operating informally. We cannot monitor. Do you have any other, from your experience at UNIDO, in terms of challenges to implementation, specifically in developing countries?
Thank you so much. No, I think it's a wide understanding that these technologies are there. They could be applicable technologically and technically it's possible, but the mental part, actually also Douglas mentioned it, the psycho part is very important because, as I was mentioning, maybe I'm repeating myself, so the countries, the SMEs, the larger companies, both in developing world and developed industrialized world, they're a little bit scared, they're not yet ready mentally. They're not understanding. You might remember those maps where not all parts of the world were discovered, and you remember the image, instead of the continents where we have now continents or islands, there were images of the dragons. It's something what mentally was scaring and fearing actually the people, because it's unknown. We didn't know about what is behind the Atlantic Ocean, what is in the South Hemisphere. So the same with, especially with AI, maybe if other technology is more clear, I think we need to a little bit unscare the business community, saying that AI, simplify the words, AI is a data manager, is a smart data management tool. It's helping your businesses to make them more efficient, smarter, competitive, and safer in a real-time mode, basically based on the same sensors. And sensors maybe sounds very, very like, you know, sci-fi. No, it's a simple camera. It could cost even less than $50. And, but those cameras are supported with the brains. So there is some analytics behind. So you collect this data in a real time mode. You analyze this data. You might marry this data with another source of the data. You put some analytics, and you're giving back to the business decision makers, to the policy decision makers, to the safety officers, a evidence-based solution. So I think we have to start with awareness raising, and this is one of the objectives of our initiatives. I'm very happy that we can start from there.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I think that's a great point about the dragons. They can be scary, but they're not. They don't need to be. We have really just a couple of minutes left. Just wanted to give you an opportunity to reflect on developing countries. I think you already mentioned, Douglas, this point about costs. Yes, it can be costly, but also costs are going down. Sensors are becoming cheaper. Solutions are being tested, which reduces the cost. Is that an opportunity for developing countries?
Yes, the costs are going down on the technology, but the requirements to invest in more technology is going up. Yep. So the two diagrams are intersecting in a way where you're still putting a regulatory cost requirement to be compliant, right? Assuming that you're in a country that has the right compliance rules. And a lot of this is coming from the West. Let's just be honest, right? A lot of this is coming from requirements for either sustainability, or safety. And now the digital product passport, every product that you buy in Europe is now going to have a QR code on it that tells you all of the manufacturing steps and all the embedded carbon. So here's my question to the buyers and the regulators that are writing this. Why are you not making safety profitable? Okay? If you're going to collect all this data, and you've got sustainability reports that you're doing as a corporation, why would you not want to buy safe? Okay? You're asking them to collect the data. Make it a metric. Make it a metric. Now I can see my time of return, because when I put my digital manifest out as part of my requirement for my reporting into the digital product passport, I can score it, right? We have that tech now. As long as we can keep it low cost, open source, and flexible, let's flip the narrative.
Yes, brilliant. That's a great point. I think Farouk, you already touched upon this, but wanted to give you just chance in the last few seconds just to talk a little bit about developing countries. What are the opportunities, concrete opportunities for deployment?
I think, again, maybe I return back to simplifying the things, but I think the key word is solution, led by a good example. So what we're trying to do, and within the AIM Global Initiative, and would like to replicate maybe within the GMIS and GFIS initiative, is to codify the success stories of simple, replicable, and scalable solutions, so to put them in a platform, so the SMEs in the countries, developing countries, or larger companies, they can get inspired, try to replicate that. The solution would have enough information to share on experience, on maybe expertise, how to do that, how much does it cost, to show it's not a rocket science, it's not $1 million technology, it's not a sci-fi fiction story, it's really doable, it's replicable, it could be done. When we're starting all this initiative in AI, fourth industrial revolution, some African countries were saying, guys, we're not yet there to tap into the fourth. You know, our best and first example and application of the AI was in Africa. We're proud of this. So we want to show those examples, and I think we can benefit from the same principle and populate the GIFIS initiative portal with such solutions and to show it's doable, replicable, and scalable.
Thank you so much. Zoe, I will leave to give you the last word.
The last words. My last message is that we have seen countless initiatives, countless manifestos out there, AI regulation, AI guidelines, AI principles, and there's a gap between a manifesto and implementation. So I just really hope that this is not a box that they will tick in, just a gesture of support, that this manifesto will build momentum, will drive change, because it's a fundamental human right. Everyone, whether they're working in a multinational corporation, in a small factory, in a rich, wealthy country, in a developing country, regardless of their gender, their immigration status, their ethnicity, their salary, they have the right to go to work and come home safely. As I said, it's not luxury, it's not privilege, it's a right.
So that is a great message to conclude. We talk about video games, about virtual reality, about dragons. So safety can be fun. So please join me in thanking the panel for their contribution today.